Rick.
All right,
Uh,
here we go again. Our last part of this series, War Legions, the comeback. Now, we just talked about the potential conflict between China and Taiwan. And now we'd like Barca to continue his point about what if.
well, I yeah.
Yeah,
What if now? Since the first question, when the first approach was if it was just between mainland China and Taiwan, then already gave my point there. I said my piece there.
right.
And for what if Taiwan, what's this, uh, has allies, okay? And these allies were more active and cooperative in their behalf. So I guess the porcupine strategy or porcupine doctrine that Taiwan has adopted in the last few decades, would be of much help to that kind of approach, because it is a matter of trying to outlast until sufficient aid or help could bring Taiwan and mainland China to at least a stalemate, okay, or at least agree on an armistice. Uh, that's the least expectation I would have, because
Right.
obviously it's going to be a drawn out battle, and battles of attrition are not healthy in the long run, and they can cause more problems and more harm
So, do
than
you
good.
think? So, are you saying that China would try to shorten the war?
Yeah, as much as possible. So blitzkrieg, if possible. If they can do that, they should.
Oh, that's a
I'd
very
recommend
interesting
it.
point. That's a very interesting point because my next question, uh, a much more definitive question, will be how a war between China and Taiwan would look like. That's probably the best question to ask if we talk about war of attrition or blitzkrieg. So, Barca mentioned that maybe the most effective way to win a war or to shorten a war between China and Taiwan is to apply a similar tactic of the blitzkrieg or lightning war. Well, I'd like to ask Marco on this. Like, do you believe, or what kind of? Okay, maybe I'd like to ask this question: how it would look like if there's a war between China and Taiwan? What would the war would look like?
Well, first of all, a lot of ways it will be similar to previous wars, but there's a new angle: cyberspace. So the first strike should be to cripple Taiwan's communications and economy, like stock market, set panic. So it's one possibility in which the North Koreans have, you know, have mastered, even the Russians did to the Ukrainians, is that it's gonna be a full-scale cyber attack to Taiwanese infrastructure, shutting down power, the power grids, putting chaos, probably launch a computer virus or hack the financial markets of Taiwan. And indirectly, it could also hit Japan and other countries. So setting off, panic panic mode to these to the Taiwanese people and potential allies. And once you knock out the communications, cause havoc to its economic infrastructures, the first wave would be most likely would be a precise missile strikes on Taiwanese military installations. Of course, Taiwan has prepared for this. And then after that, there would be air battle, wherein the Taiwanese Air Force would try, I mean, the Chinese Air Force would try to establish air superiority over the Taiwanese Strait, while the Chinese Navy would attempt to blockade Taiwan. And of course, for the Chinese, as much as possible, they would try to minimize the damage of Taiwan because they also need those infrastructure if they manage to occupy Taiwan. So it will be an intense battle, but unlikely, in order to reduce the detection, the Chinese have invested heavily on ASAT, or what they call anti-satellite weaponry, wherein one of the key areas is trying to disrupt or destroy GPS communications in order to blind the United States. So although they have an idea that an upcoming war or invasion will come in, but they will try to blind or disrupt these communication lines with the U.S. Of course, at this stage, the U.S. would now gradually reinforce their units around the Asia Pacific region. But in the initial stages of the conflict, the U.S., even with Japan, would be severely outnumbered because if at the opening stages, it's not just going to be Taiwan. The Chinese will also attempt to hit forward U.S. military bases. This would be Okinawa and the Yokota Air Base in Tokyo and the headquarters of the U.S. 7th Fleet, the at the Yokosuka Naval Base. So they will attempt to destroy these bases in order to slow down the American intervention. Automatically, it would also drag Japan and most likely Australia to the conflict. So, by chance, after an air battle, the Chinese would use commandeer, including commercial vessels. Once they weaken the defenses of Taiwan, they would attempt to land the troops in Taiwan and head straight for Taipei and capture the capital city, which is the center or the heart of the Taiwanese society or infrastructure.
Now, speaking of the capturing Taipei, would it be hard for China to capture Taipei city entirely? Because we can expect a house-to-house combat, then probably the Taiwanese people are ready for that. In fact, they've been trained. Some civilian volunteers are trained for a house-to-house combat. If Chinese soldiers would occupy Taipei city, the Taiwanese people promise that it's gonna be a tough thing to win.
It's gonna be a difficult
Yeah,
battle. The Americans have experienced that during the Battle of Fallujah in the Iraq War, and of course the Russians taking on Kiev. It's difficult, and especially with the advancements of technology, the drones and everything, it's gonna be a tough battle. But that scenario would only be achievable provided that you have achieved air and naval air superiority around the Taiwanese Strait. But again, uh, in that scenario, it's either the United States does not intervene, or it's either the Chinese were able to complete they were able to completely achieve that dominance in that battle area in order for you to successfully land troops. Now, I'd like to share. I have watched a RAND video. It's a think tank in Washington D.C. How a war would look like. They said that at the end of these war games, if the United States intervene, the U.S. won the war, but at the heavy cost of its assets. I think, if I recall, the losses are as high as 12 American naval vessels sunk, and roughly half of the Chinese Navy was destroyed. And the Chinese were able to land troops in Taiwan, but the U.S. were able to destroy the logistical supply chain, so supplying the necessary logistics to these foreign troops would be difficult for the Chinese. But again, these are all hypotheticals, but that's how the war is going to look like.
hypotheticals that have
Now,
been already featured in what's this? If I interject, they already been shown in Modern Warfare 2 and Modern Warfare 3. The way Russia invaded the states and how the states, the U.S. Special Forces were able to retake New York City. Although that was a hypothetical scenario, but that's it's
Mm,
amazing to see
right.
it in play.
Well, all these war games, hypothetical scenarios. You mentioned about the RAND. They try to simulate the war, but in my observation, the what is involved in these war games are conventional weaponry. So I'd like to ask
yes.
Dark Adam on this. Do you think nuclear weapons will be involved if there's a war between China and Taiwan?
Well, if there is nuclear weapons involved, I think
I
other
mean,
countries will
sorry. The
also.
question is, do you think there will be, or do you think there's a possibility of a nuclear weapon being involved in this war? If there's,
No, no, because the reason why the answer is no, because one of the main targets of China why they want to get Taiwan is because of the semiconductor industry. They want those microchip companies. Yes,
I
by
see,
using a nuclear weapon, it will gonna destroy everything. Even if it's indirect hit, it will gonna destroy the machines,
I
and
see.
it will be a huge disadvantage for China because other countries like for example America and the West, they can recreate that factory again, but China they cannot. So they're gonna be left behind when it comes to technology.
All
That
right.
that is why they don't want to sabotage that.
So
So
no
it's gonna
nuclear
no
weapons.
no. It's gonna be
Do you
a big
agree?
loss for
Okay, a big loss for China. Do you agree,
yes.
Marka?
Mm, the closest they would employ Seguro is an EMP, just to sabotage or was this knock down whatever electronics the enemy has. So if I were leading an amphibious assault under the with the detonation of an EMP or electromagnetic pulse, uh, at least it could sabotage and increase my chances of taking the capital faster. Okay, the
Without the
enemy
use of,
the enemy without the use of what's this explosive force or explosive ordnance, minimal. It could sabotage the communications arrays of the enemy or
right.
whoever would dare take a stand against the mainland China. So
Okay.
the closest would be an electromagnetic pulse, and an atomic bomb is wasted on Taiwan actually for such a small island.
But what if the other way around? I mean, that if the U.S. would dare
Okay.
attack China
Would there?
using nuclear weapons?
Hmm, that's interesting. That's interesting. I wonder how the world will view the U.S. for using or for at least considering the use of an atomic bomb for the second time, just to end the war
Okay.
faster.
Marco, do you
Hmm.
think it's a possibility?
It's a possibility in the case it's just a matter of survival of the regime. Failure for the Chinese to take on Taiwan, it will have a huge effect because it will be viewed negatively towards the Chinese Communist Party. So nuclear weapons, it's a matter of survival for the regime as well. Because if they lose this war, expect that the people of China will revolt and overthrow the government, and that is what we call self-preservation. Now, as regards when to deploy the nuclear weapons, it could be depending on the situation on the battlefield or around the area in Taiwan. Let's say, for example, they lost the conventional, they lost most of their air force, or probably they lost too many casualties. They would probably employ. Of course, they're careful not to escalate it into a full-scale nuclear exchange, but I foresee the employment as what Mr. Barca said, a combination of EMP and tactical nuclear warheads. Most likely, they will not be deployed against Taiwan, but probably, for example, on assumption that the US will be involved, it will be deployed against forward American military bases, Guam, and to some extent Okinawa, and yeah, the headquarters of the Seventh Fleet. And if they have the opportunity to target American carrier battle groups with nukes, they would use it. Now, on the other
But
side, if the Americans, when if the Americans would use nuclear weapons like utilizing F-35s equipped with B-61 tactical nuclear warheads, yes, probably in cases similar to China, wherein the US would lose face because they suffered heavy casualties and the war is not going on very well on their side, then probably they would use nuclear weapons. I think it's a matter of self-preservation of American prestige and power. If that's the
And
case, similar
I
to the doctrine the U.S. emphasized during the height of the Cold War, facing against the Soviets in Europe, wherein they really put plans wherein if NATO or allied forces would be overwhelmed by the Soviet forces, the Americans, together with the British, are ready to use tactical nuclear warheads to stem the tide of battle. So I foresee there might be a possibility, but the problem there is that once you launch a nuclear weapon, whether it's China or US, can you control it? Can you just say, okay, we'll just stop at bombing Guam or bombing the forward bases of China? But can you expect that it will stop there? Who knows? Some lunatic might decide, let's use the bigger nuclear weapons, the one
right,
what we
okay.
call city.
Mm. So speaking of Soviet Union, you mentioned about Soviet Union. Do you think Russia will intervene or try to assist China in its war against Taiwan and the United States?
Well, one thing's for sure, they will. With considering the political dynamics that we have now, they will. They will supply China with not just natural resources, including some of their best weapons. They will supply. But as to intervening, sending in forces, I cannot really answer that because the moment Russia joins a war because of Taiwan, I think it's understood it's gonna be World War III. I mean, Taiwan comes
Yeah,
in and expect NATO will come
well,
in.
that's probably the case. In fact, North Korea is now supplying missiles to Russia. Uh, anyway, okay. So now let's go to the ultimate question of the day, which is what's the impact or what are the impacts of a war between Taiwan and China? I'm talking about the economic impact, the political impact, and at the same time, the social impact of this war between China and Taiwan. I'd like to ask Dark Adam first.
So which one should I answer first?
Well, you
If
can
I
just
would-
summarize your opinion. You can start
Okay.
with political or economic, or you can just point out one aspect of it. Maybe you can just point out economic or political. It's up to you.
Let's start with economic. I think it will gonna create what you call it chain problem. What's the term again? Like
Chain reaction.
supply chain.
Supply chain.
Yes, because China is the factory of the world, so it will gonna create a supply chain similar to, or let's just say worse than Ukraine, because Ukraine is supplying for the bread flour, yeah, that one,
The wheat.
and the
Wheat.
the wheat, and also but in China, they have more things to export, so the
That's
supply
true.
chain will be cut off regardless if China wins the war or China loses the war. It will still gonna create a supply chain issue. And then politically, uh, it will gonna create also problems to China, regardless if they win or they lost the war. Because if China lost, it means that all the things that they have, their weapons, etc., it's a joke. And if they win, China will be labeled as the new North Korea. Like, North Korea is bad, but this time China will be like much more evil compared to North Korea. North Korea will be like, more friendly compared to China. Yeah, like politically. Like, today North Korea is more bad than China, but if China won the war, China will
It
be
would be like
the
China
new
would
bad
become the
guy.
new Nazi. You mean?
Yeah, the new bad guy, yes. Because I don't think China will stop there. I think China will expand more. But they were gonna start in Taiwan first. I mean, the name of their aircraft carrier, the Fujian, it is a reference for the Chinese people, because the people in Fujian are immigrants. That's why they call that ship as Fujian, because it means that this ship we're gonna go around the world. So if you're gonna look at that perspective, Taiwan is just their first step. Their next step is will be the whole world. So regardless if China wins or lost, they're still gonna lose anyway in
Mm.
politics or in economic. So there's that heavy weight that China has to carry, regardless if they win or they lost. They have to carry this big weight, and I don't think China can handle this huge weight because China right now they have many problems.
I
They
see.
have, they have many problems. Yeah, economically, financially, politically speaking, there are infights in politics between Xi Jinping and the other parties. So yeah, I don't think China can even last long, regardless if they win or lose the war.
All right. Thank you for that very thorough and fully explained thoughts, Dark Adam. Now, I'd like to go with Barca. Socio-political, economic, or geopolitical impacts of war between China and Taiwan.
Hmm. Interesting. If Taiwan lost, uh, then of course the long-awaited reunification of China, of the One China policy, would be a tremendous burst of what's this? Well, achievement for the not only for the Chinese themselves or the mainland Chinese themselves, but also for the Communist Party that rules Beijing. Okay,
Mm.
so that is going to at least now we can be sure that the all the well, unless of course the current the current Chinese the current Taiwanese electronics and other technological magnates will be immigrating to other countries. So uh, they will remain. The rest will remain under Chinese auspices. So they will be at least now. There will be a sharing now, a thorough sharing of technologies, expertise in terms of what they can do in terms of innovations and products.
Mm.
If well, that's a very, I mean, very kind of positive side for China, considering
Kind of a
it's a
revival of China, right? In its glory
yeah,
days.
like a renaissance,
Mm.
like a renaissance that is waiting to happen. But there has to be blood before renaissance.
That's true.
Okay?
There should be like a
If I mean,
dark
the
age.
reverse, yeah, if the reverse were also true, then China, last what Dark Adam said, would suffer more than a burdenous reputation. Okay, but also on how its people will view its current government. Okay, there might be a change in government, either for the more for better, okay, for better governance in terms of a push towards a democratic front, like the one that is propagated in Taiwan,
Mm.
or of course they would strive to survive and strongly was this rebuild the Communist Party, okay,
Right.
because they
But
also stand so much. They also stand to lose a lot if
mm,
they let go of that easily.
yeah, in terms of losing a lot, do you think there's going to be a global depression? Considering that the world is so interconnected.
There would be one, but I don't expect it to be that long. We would also move on because just like everything was made in China before, it used to be made in USA, made in Taiwan. At least now it will diversify. Okay, it will go back to having uh, markets, specific markets with their own niches. Okay,
Mm.
so it will be also. I think it will be best diversified and distributed here in Asia because Vietnam, Thailand are emerging markets that can now compete with mainland China in certain aspects. So, as a matter of fact, some of the major companies of first world countries have chosen these countries other than mainland China to be their manufacturing plants. So,
Yes.
yeah, I expect there would be a drain, okay,
You mean Southeast
a
Asia will be the
loss.
new outsourcing hub for
Yeah,
developed
we have
countries
always been one. We have always been one, but not as diverse as
as in China?
as now because China's monopolized a lot of these things.
All right.
Okay?
Thank you very much for
And
your insights, Barca. And now, last but not the least, Marco, what do you think are the impacts, the cultural, economic, socio-political, if there's a war between China and Taiwan?
Well, it depends on the results of that conflict. In a hypothetical scenario wherein China won the war, well, the world order as you know it in World War II would really change. For one, other countries would view it, with hostility because their now securities are now threatened more than ever. So yeah, China would achieve its objective, but yeah, it would not stop there. They would go on to dominate their interests. Like for example, they still have the Senkaku Islands, the South China Sea, and they would go beyond those arenas. So definitely there will be more arms built up and nuclear proliferation. Wherein Japan, countries like Japan would probably consider their own nuclear weapons, and depending on the situation, the United States would probably, we would probably be boosting their forces in the Asia Pacific region. So yeah, that's the likely scenario that would happen. But in terms of economics, yes, there will be change. Probably for one, the prestige China have economically with other countries that are not so friendly with the West. They would increase their ties with China. So yeah, China will have more political and economic influence, particularly in the Southeast Asia region. Now,
Including
on the
us?
other side of the coin, if China loses the war, well, one would be the Communist Party would probably be overthrown by the Chinese people. It would probably signal the end of the communist China. Or if they do manage to retain power, it's gonna be like they're gonna be the Hermit Kingdom, the new North Korea, but on a bigger scale. And it would also strengthen U.S. Dominance or Western dominance in the region. It would reinforce its influence and maintain the global order. So those are the typical the possible scenarios that you know what will happen if those are in aftermath of the conflict.
Okay, thank you very much, guys, for your insights. And well, I just have to throw this question because we are Filipinos. What can we get from it if there's a war with China and Taiwan? You mentioned it earlier that our Filipinos would just be like, we'll just go on with our lives, just focus on prosperity, financial fortune, whatever. But economically, do you think it would affect the Philippines a lot?
Yes.
Mm.
Yes.
yes,
Yes, it would.
yes.
Yes, it will affect,
Yeah.
but
And
it's something that
for one, for example, if China won the war, yeah, definitely, as I mentioned earlier, there will be a realignment in economic ties in Southeast Asia, wherein probably a lot of countries, because China has more clout and influence already, probably will be strengthening more ties with China economically because it's the new kid, the new power block, the new superpower in the region that displaces the United States as the
Mm.
premier power in Asia Pacific. So yeah, there would be more, will be more economically entwined with China, and probably in some respects we would be less assertive
I see.
particularly in our claims to South China Sea. That's the way I see it. And on the other hand, if the United States does want win the war, or they of course definitely there will be uh, changes also in our supply chains. Right now, the Philippines is more economically intertwined with China than the United States. So, if China loses the war, it will be sanctioned by the international community. So there will be a ripple effect in the supply chain. So some Filipino businesses will probably outsource some of their products from China to other countries because they could no longer do business with China. I mean, one clear example is Russia. When the international community sanctioned Russia, uh, a lot of our transactions with Russia has been canceled due to the war. So most likely that would also happen in the Philippines if war would be favorable to the United States and China loses the war. So yeah, it will be similar to the Russians.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for those wonderful thoughts. But we do hope that such conflict, even in a smaller scale, would not occur um, now or in the future, because war is definitely a very, very negative thing to happen in our civilization. We knew during World War II, lots of Germans and Japanese, they were put in some. They were segregated. Basically, Japanese citizens, American Japanese citizens were segregated so that they would not be considered as spies, or they would not be used as spies. And considering the fact that there are millions of Chinese all over the world, and probably in all countries in the world, it is very hard to, you know, control this situation. So yeah, hopefully a conflict like that would not happen in our generation. So, thank you very much, guys. And any last words, Dark Adam?
Uh, uh, Peace on Earth. I don't know. I don't know what to say. Did I? Wait.
Okay.
No, no audio. No audio. No, no,
No,
no.
no, I can.
We
Wait.
can hear you.
We can hear you.
Oh,
We
you
can
can
hear
hear
you.
that?
We can hear you.
Ah, okay. I don't know what to say. I think I already said it already.
Right.
Do you have
Okay.
any question? Do you have any question?
Now, I think that's the last one, and then you
Ah,
nailed the
okay.
last question, Doc Adam. Marco, do you have
Okay.
any thoughts or closing remark?
Not really. I always say it was a very interesting discourse that we have today. That's all I can
Okay,
say.
I think so too. Yeah, very interesting. And Barca.
I'll just take it from a quote, a very famous one. The only reason for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing.
All right. So probably it's like a similar. There's a similar quote by the in the book of Dan Brown. I'm not sure if that's Inferno or that book was
I
Da
think it's
Vinci Code.
Edmund Burke.
yeah.
Uh,
I forgot that quote, but it goes like this, like uh well I yeah, it's at the tip of my tongue, but I cannot remember. But it 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 talks about neutrality. Um, it's like if you remain neutral, that's that's not a good thing. Yeah, probably it says like evil triumphs in neutrality. I forgot, but yeah, it mirrors to what Barca mentioned. You know.
Mm.
So anyway, thank you very much, guys, and see you again next time. Let's have another episode. Let's talk about another topic. Hopefully, we can talk about Korean War with
Okay.
our original host, Mr. H. Yeah. Thank you and have a good evening.
Good
Thank you.
evening.
Bye bye.
Thank